I heard a bing. You heard a bing. Everybody heard a bing. So Arcane and I are having a chat that is I would describe as far too pleasant for a Google Hangout for two guys that are on opposite sides or whatever you want to call it. So is that a fair assessment? It's far too pleasant.
Sure.
So we're going to go to air and treat each other like dicks. Is that the plan?
Yeah, why not? Right off the bat,
Okay.
let's go at it.
All right. Well, let's catch people up because I don't know how many people would have seen the thread that got us into this time. I mean, I think I've sort of busted your chops enough and kind of retreaded what's happened over the last couple of weeks, where we've had some comments about Hovind, some discussion about the evidence involved in the prosecution of Kent Hovind, the two prosecutions of Kent Hovind, and then didn't have any hangouts over that topic, and then just today, Christopher Mowdy had put up something saying he saw a couple of good hangouts last night, and somehow I don't even remember or understand how the topic ventured into the Presup argument, and somebody said it's dead. You take the position the Presup argument is not dead. I had said I can beat the Presup argument with one question, and then I think you called me Mr. Poopy Pants. I'm sure I'm mischaracterizing the conversation, but just letting people know if you're really curious about the origins of this conversation, it's a recent post by Christopher Mowdy where he says he saw a couple of hangouts he really liked. So what are you in the mood for, Arcane? You want to comment on the missed hangouts from the last couple of weeks, or do you want to dive into Presup or talk about the boxing thing that you're not missing it yet?
Not yet. Got a few hours.
Yeah. But I just embarrassed myself by saying the boxing thing, making it perfectly obvious to everybody.
Yeah, give us a curtsy, HogTie. But I didn't get a chance to see your Ken Hovind hangout. I ended up getting caught up with family and stuff, and I had to take care of some things. But I guess from what you said, that the Christians that you had on agreed that he broke the law. They just didn't necessarily agree with the law. Is that right?
At the risk of speaking for them, I think that was fair. That was a teacher, Jack Coombs, teacher of the Bible, and his son, administrator of the Teachers Forum. And they're reasonably well known. They do G-Men's Hangouts, and I know Jack, teacher's been doing a few Hangouts on his own channel. And they came in. I don't know that they followed the case that closely. I think that their view was, if Kent Hovind is a brother in Christ, then we evaluate him by his words, his fruits, and that sort of thing. And they a number of times referred to him as a very good brother in Christ. They really like his material. And then, oh, well, he got himself in some trouble with the law. That's for the law to deal with. And they didn't really seem to have that much interest in sort of pursuing what it was. But then presented with the evidence, they were like, yeah, it looks like he broke the law. But it did lead to a really interesting discussion about sort of kind of like what would you like American society to be, especially at the federal level, that you kind of got this mammoth, money machine that just gulps up everything. So that was my characterization of what happened last week.
Do you think that he should still be in prison today?
Well, I do think that what he did specifically was bad enough to go to prison. It does seem like a long sentence. There are a lot of things that like I think a guy would have to do something more severe than sort of interfering with the tax process to spend a decade in a federal prison. That's not to say that his life is that harsh. He's in a pretty comfortable federal prison, but that's not the point, right? The point is I know it's silly. Well, he's comfortable. No, he doesn't have his freedom. Like they needed to make an example of him. But as far as like a decade, that's a lot.
Yeah, I've known of rapists and armed robbers and murderers who've gotten less time than that. So it seems, at least from a Christian perspective, that the guy's being persecuted.
Oh, well, okay, that's the leap of logic I just don't buy into. Is why is he persecuted? Like persecuted on religious grounds?
Well, yeah. Well, for one, the judge has a known bias against Christians. She tried to send a couple of teachers to jail for praying over their lunch.
A story that's just not at all true, but okay.
That's not true?
No.
Says who?
Huh? Well, okay. I would have to take a moment to look up that story again. But I remember when I first seen okay, the judge in the case, which again, it's just been a couple weeks since I've looked at this material again. I used to remember the judge's name. I don't remember the judge's name now, but she's a district court judge, and you guys have elections and stuff, and there's like this Yelp for judges, like this website where you could review judges. And since the prosecution of Kent Hovind, if you look on this on her review page, she is the worst rated judge in the United States right now, state and federal level. And when you look at the number of people who've left negative comments and the number of people who've left downvotes, it's in the order of 4 times the number of people that she could have encountered during her entire legal career, right? There are, I know the Free Hovind website has a lot of stories about how she was involved in an illegal pornography ring. There's the story about her quite, having to sort of be dragged back from the brink of jailing these teachers for very calmly and quietly praying over their lunch. And that's just not what happened. Like, I mean, we can, you're catching me a little off guard with that particular anecdote, but that's basically how these things work, right? You can sit here and you can come up with 15 different stories, slamming somebody like that. And okay, well, we can now go to Google and we can research this and look at different sources other than freehovind.com and see what the actual story is there. But so what? That doesn't speak to whether or not Kent Hovind broke the law. Like, I just don't see the point in that.
Yeah, and just like 13 people that were at his trial testified, swore that they heard her say that he was worse than a rapist when she was handing out her sentence. Now, saying that somebody is worse than a rapist for simply moving their own money out of their own bank account, whether you want to call it structuring or whatever, saying that that is worse than a rapist, I think she has a pretty emotional disposition towards Ken Hovind for some reason to make that comment.
Okay, well, first off, I would think so. That's a little over the top. And to say that he's worse than a rapist, I think there would you'd want to ask her or what is the context for that, because that's just such an insane thing to say. So, in your view, I guess how confident are you that that's what she said, that she referred to what Kent Hovind had done as being worse than a rapist?
Well, Ken Hovind said it, and 13 people swore that they heard her say it, and for some reason it wasn't on the court manuscript. So I don't know. I'm pretty confident. I don't think Ken Hovind will have any reason to lie about that.
Well, that's a different issue. I'm not at all confident that that's what she said. I initially, when I first heard it, and then they said, well, it's not in the transcript. I mean, then the pendulum would sort of swing towards, well, no, that's not what she said, because the transcript is a word-for-word recording of everything that's said, and it's based off of audio recordings. There's actually audio tape. They don't just sit there and go clickety 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 click while they're going. They actually record the thing and then they will transcribe the tape later. So there's actually audio tape of what happened. So my initial thinking is, yeah, okay, whatever. They want to, these are the same people that say that she's part of an illegal porn ring. Then yeah, there are 13 sworn statements, affidavits from people who sworn under oath in the form of an affidavit that's what she said. And that to me brings the pendulum back to sort of the middle of I don't know that that's what she said, because remember, you're not just to say that that's what she said in the courtroom. The worse than a rapist comment is to say at the same time you believe that somebody, well, I guess you don't have to believe that they altered the transcript. Maybe there's just a mistake. They just forgot to put that in. But here's what it gets me is that when they interview people like, wow, that's pretty shocking. Like, what did she say? And people go, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that. It's not in the records. The tapes are there to be examined. Like, nobody seems to know like where this comment is. But then you have 13, it might be 14 because you might have to include Hovind in this. But listen, it's more than a dozen evangelical Christians who, when asked about it, said, oh yeah, I'd be quite happy to swear that statement. Right? Like, why is it that no non-believers heard this judge say that? Why is it that no Muslims or Catholics, just other types of Christians? Why is it that they're all evangelicals? Like, that to me I find really weird, that somehow this was only heard by people of a particular denomination of Christianity, and nobody else seemed to have heard the comment and have even denied, like, oh no, I was there, I listened to it, and I didn't hear it.
I think a better way to phrase that would be, I think it's strange that only those people came forward and saying they did it. Because the whole courtroom might have heard it. It's just those people were the only ones who came forward to say that they did.
Well, other people
So,
have been asked about it expressly, and they've come forward to say that no, that is not what happened. So
yeah, well, that's something that we can't affirm from where we're sitting. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, he sentenced this man to 10 years for moving his own money. Now, how you personally feel about Ken Hovind, is irrelevant. Was justice served is the question, and I would say hell no.
well, you slipped in a couple of things there. One, you said, well, these people came forward and admitted, right? You're sort of assuming that it's true that that's what the judge had actually said. And you're saying, and then, so basically there's two types of people that were in that courtroom. There's people who came forward and told the truth, and that was that that's what she said. And then there's other people who just either hid and didn't say anything, or they outright lied about it, right? It's a little bit presumptuous. The other thing that you're slipping in there is that this is important in any way. Like, I think would be unpalatable for a judge to say something like that, but does it speak to the evidence? And it doesn't. It's got nothing to do with it. It's yet another dodge of, we're not going to talk about what the evidence was. Then you do as many other Hovind apologists do. You say, yeah, well, there's this thing about these affidavits and that sort of thing, and he was just convicted for moving his own money around. And then let's also talk about this other thing over here. Like, was he convicted for moving his own money around? Is that your recollection?
That's what structuring is.
Not exactly.
Money out of your own bank account.
I think you can put a little more meat on the bone. I think I suspect you know a little more about what structuring is than that definition. Like, is it your view, if I go down to the bank and I take $20 out of my checking account, I'm structuring?
According to that law, yeah. No. According to that law, anybody with a bank account and anybody who withdraws less than $10,000 within a certain period of time is guilty of structuring. So I'm guilty of structuring if I go and I pull out $9,000 today, go tomorrow and pull out another crime.
I had a little bit of an audio breakup on my end, but what I got from that was you're saying I'm guilty of structuring if I take out $9,000 today and then go later in the week and pull out another $9,000 and go and pull out another $9,000 and do that you're guilty of structuring.
Right.
Is it what has informed your understanding of what structuring is? Like, where did you learn about this law? And what other sources have you, like, when people have explained to you, like, there must have been some point when somebody said, oh, well, he was guilty of structuring, or they were charging him with structuring. You went, oh, what's structuring? So where have you learned about what structuring is?
You can look it up. A simple Google search will show you.
I know. I can look it up. I'm aware of that. Anybody else can look it up. Everybody who's watching, go ahead. You can look it up. I'm asking you, Arcane, what was your source of information? How did you come to understand what structuring is?
The law dictionary. Just like anyone else should look up any law, you're going to look at the law dictionary. You're not going to just go ask Joe Smo off the street.
Structuring would not be in a law dictionary. It's come specifically from a statute, right? This is the Banking Security Act of 1985.
Yeah, same difference. You're not going to go ask.
No, because a dictionary defines legal terms. Legal dictionary doesn't contain all of the statutes of all the countries on the whole planet, right? That you have to look at the statutes for Colorado, or you have to look at the statutes, in this case, the United States Code. So have you taken time to look up what structuring is in it would be the BSA, Banking Security Act? Like, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at, instead of doing that with you, I think that what my guess is, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, is that where you've learned about structuring is by listening to Hovind supporters say, well, they just put him in jail for moving his own money around.
Okay, then why don't you tell me, since you claim to know, what is structuring?
Well, the reason why I wouldn't tell you, I still will, but a very fair reason for me to say, no, I'm not going to tell you, is because I've already, oh, I'm sorry, it was going to be unfair. I was going to say, because I've already told you this in comments, and it's, you're not listening. Sorry, it was Pillbox. I told this in comments. So that's unfair. I apologize for what I was about to say. Okay, so structuring is, okay, first you have to go back to I forget which act it is, but it's from the 1970s, where they first, in 1976, I think, where they first made a reporting requirement. So, and they just pick an arbitrary number, $10,000. That's going to be important later, by the way. The $10,000 figure turns out to be important. Because it's so arbitrary. They just said, well, we don't want to have like the bank have to report to the government every $20 cash withdrawal or $56 cash deposit, right? So $10,000, any cash transaction that happens, withdrawal deposits, whatever, over $10,000 is reportable to the government. And of course, very quickly, some criminal enterprises get on this and they realize like, oh, we're getting busted by this. So what we're going to do is we're going to structure our transactions so that we can evade this reporting requirement. So in 1985, the Banking Security Act made illegal the structuring of transactions in this fashion that we just described when it's for the purpose of evading the reporting requirements, because it's in the furtherance of supporting another crime. For example, drug dealing, money laundering, racketeering, or evasion of taxes to be remitted. Right? Now, there's other examples, and I think it's also important to note that there's a history of misapplication. So, and I'll give you an example of the guy that this is sort of a famous story in the States, the gun owner that he owned a gun shop in Georgia, where he had an insurance policy for his gun shop that included a $10,000 limit on benefits for losses that were called off-property losses. So if somebody comes in and robs your store and they take $54,000 worth of stuff, well, then the bank's got to pay you $54,000. But his off-property losses, so if he takes $11,000 to the bank and he gets mugged with $11,000 cash, he had a $10,000 limit of benefits for off-property losses. So if he got mugged with $11,000 on him, the bank or the insurance company would say, here's your $10,000. So he was structuring his transactions, that is specifically his deposits, so that he only ever carried $10,000 to him at a time, with him at a time. So he was fairly routinely coming to the bank with money that was between $8,000 and $10,000. And so they reported that, and the IRS investigated, because that's the other thing. There's a second reporting thing. They report the transactions, anything over $10,000, or when there's a pattern of almost $10,000 transactions. So he got reported in that sort of screening test, right? And the IRS went and they did asset forfeiture. They cleaned out his bank accounts, like $500,000 or something they took from him, and he had to sue to get it back. So recently, the IRS has clarified, apologized, and said, to be clear, this asset forfeiture thing, as a result of structuring, this is for when the person's breaking the law already. The Banking Security Act makes it clear that the structuring must be done knowingly. You must be intentionally, like intent is an element of the crime here. You have to be intending to evade the reporting requirements. So it's illegal when you're doing it to evade the reporting requirements. So this gun shop owner, that would be an example of structuring transactions to meet an insurance policy. That's not illegal. And the IRS has actually apologized to that guy and come out and been very clear to say, oops, yeah, that's not what it's for. But it is for drug dealers, money launderers, racketeers, and people who evade taxes, for example.
Right. None of which you can prove that Ken Hovind is either any of.
Well, not the drug dealing or the money laundering, but the tax evasion, certainly.
How can you prove that he was evading taxes? First of all, aren't churches an exception to that?
Well, they could be if he was, but he wasn't.
So he was. So you're telling me that you have proof that he was structuring payments to evade taxes?
Yes. Yeah. I do. Everybody else does. It's part of the transcript. And here's what. Do you know? Was he convicted of tax evasion?
No.
He was not convicted of tax evasion.
No. He was convicted of structuring.
He was convicted of structuring.
His own money. Yeah. So
was he charged with tax evasion?
No. He was charged.
He wasn't even charged with tax evasion.
Nope.
Really? So if we look at the indictment, and or let's just do it this way. Suppose I tell you that I saw the indictment and it contained 12 counts of tax evasion, 45 counts of structuring transactions to avoid detection, as we just discussed, and 1 count of obstruction of justice, for a total of 58 counts. Would that sound to you like something I just made up?
Oh, no. No. You're right. He was charged, but was he convicted? No.
Yes. He was convicted for tax evasion. And I don't know why. I've heard this a number of times lately where people have said, that like, oh, well, he wasn't convicted of tax evasion. So I mean, it used to be he was convicted. So this is my understanding how the story sort of changed. In 2006, he was convicted of tax evasion and structuring and obstructing justice. And then later, people went, "What the hell is this structuring?" And they go, "Do you realize they convicted him for taking money out of his bank account?" And then later, it got to be, "Do you realize they convicted him for taking money out of his bank account?" Remember, they never got him on tax evasion, but they did. You know, I find it weird that somehow the story just mutated into he never got convicted on the tax evasion.
Show me where he was convicted on that. And second of all, I asked you, where's your proof that he actually did evade taxes?
Oh, well, again,
you don't have it. There is no proof. He was moving his own money. He was moving his own money in a way that they could get him on that structuring law. So under the guise of he's evading taxes, they're going to get him on the structuring.
Yeah.
But there's no proof he evaded taxes.
Okay, this is a little hard to do in a live Hangout, so I'm going to be a little bit distracted here while I try to answer one of those multiple questions. I'm going to look up the conviction first, but okay. So first off, I really want to get to this point about it was his money that he was moving around. The problem is, and also that it was a church. That churches don't pay taxes. There's certainly no permission in the tax code for somebody to say, "Oh, well, I'm running a church, therefore you can't even examine my records," and there's no money that I would ever have to pay any government. Being a church does not create a cloak under which you can hide every financial transaction that you take part in. Also, being a church is not a sort of a sovereign nation in which you can now violate all the employment laws for any particular state or federal government. So it's not his money, because the reason is when you own a business. So I think I was using this example in a previous Hangout, but if you own a business and then you have an employee, so say you agree to work for me, it doesn't matter which way you want to do it, it's just an example, but you want to come work for me and I'm going to pay you $1,000 a week. So we contract so much dollars per hour, so much per day, however it works, but it works out to $1,000 per week. There's going to be a table, whether it's your country or my country. There's going to be a table you look up and says, okay, well, the gross earnings is $1,000, but you have to deduct from those earnings this much for this thing and this much for this thing. In Canada, there's actually 3 categories you deduct for, and then you remit that money to the government and they onto it. So then this way, when your taxes are due and payable, there's actually a fund in your name so that you've got money there to pay your taxes come next April when they're payable. Now, I might say, hey, guess what, Arcane? How's about we don't fool with that? How's about I just give you $900 instead of $1,000, and when you go to fill out your tax return, just say you were unemployed all year. Don't ever tell the government that I gave you money, right? That's you and I agreeing that we're going to evade these your income taxes. Whether or not it saves me money isn't an issue. As soon as you run a company and you take on employees, you adopt the responsibility to keep proper records of the money that was earned and owed for each of your employees, and to collect and remit taxes on behalf of your employees. And he just didn't do that. And second, he's not a church, because we're talking about Section 501. I think it's Title 26, but Section the 501c, the 501c3 corporations is what you hear about this all the time. He had a corporation, but he never registered that corporation as a 501c3. So he may as well have been running a hot dog stand in terms of his tax profile. He had no grounds for an exception for his corporate taxes, and it doesn't matter anyway, because what he was busted on was not withholding money for his employees and remitting that money so that his employees had a kitty to pay their taxes from when their taxes came due the next April. And he helped his employees evade taxes.
Well, let's say all of that is true. Let's say all of that is true, and he evaded all these taxes and the rest of it. 10-year sentence is kind of ridiculous. It's flat out criminal, if you ask me. So sure, even if we granted the fact that he's this horrible criminal tax cheat, okay, I know rapists and murderers, child molesters, armed robbers, you name it, who've gotten half of what he's gotten. And you guys sit here and say, well, it's not persecution. This guy's not being persecuted. That's baloney. This guy spent his money and his life debating evolutionists and kicking their rear ends. And
Okay.
he ends up in prison for 10 years. I think
Okay,
there's a correlation there somewhere.
Okay, well, I've already said I thought the 10-year sentence was a bit on the harsh side. I think what he did, it should not have been less than 5 years. I think 5, 7 years in that order would have been absolutely reasonable. It's a little long, and there's an explanation for that that doesn't appeal to the Christian masturbatory fantasy of ongoing persecution. But let me back you up to where you said, well, let's just say that all that's true. Let's just say that he actually did not pay the taxes on behalf of his employees, and let's say he did structure so he could avoid that stuff. Let's just say that's true. Are we saying that's true?
No, I'm not at all.
Okay, so then this other thing about, well, let's talk about the sentence now, is simply a way of dodging. Like you said, okay, well, where's the evidence for this? And I start describing what the basis for it is. I tell you that you're incorrect about what he was convicted of, what he was charged with. First off, you say, well, I guess he was charged with that. And then I say, okay, well, actually, he was convicted of this, and also the charges of the tax evasion weren't related to that he owed taxes that he should have paid. That's not what it was. It was he was part of an enterprise to defraud the federal government of taxes that ought to have been paid, and that's different. That's a far more serious thing.
You mean the same government? You mean the same government system that takes our tax money and goes bombs and innocent people around the world? That same government?
It's an atrocity. It's an atrocity. I really wish you guys could do something to fix that.
So at the same time, don't you see the dilemma that we're faced with here when trying to pinpoint who's the real criminal in this situation? I don't think it's Ken Hovind by any stretch.
I think there's a lot of. You want to talk about the American society? There's a lot of them to go around.
If he's guilty, let him do the time. I'm not above that whatsoever. I believe in due process and the rest of it. This is still America. But to hand out a sentence like that, I think that it was way above and beyond, and that's basically where I stand. Because let's face it, neither one of us were there. Okay, all we're doing is hearing what we hear from other people. So we can't really say what's true or what's not. We weren't in the courtroom, so.
How can you water it down like that? That's one move that you guys do, you in particular, that I don't understand in conversation at all. Is this? Anytime there's a fuzziness or a bit of a lack of certainty about something, the whole thing can be dismissed, washed away, evened out, level playing field by saying, we don't really know for sure. We don't have any way of knowing. Well, who knows what happened? You know, there could have been clowns juggling in the courtroom. No idea.
Is that what I said?
Transcript. There's a transcript. There's a transcript, right? I mean, I have the transcript on my hard drive. The thing's like 1,900 pages. I certainly couldn't be bothered to read it.
You have faith in that transcript?
I have faith in that transcript.
Did you have faith in the prosecutor, the pedophile?
Name, please. Who's the name of the prosecutor in the Kent Hovind case?
Mr. Atchison? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Atchison, not a prosecutor in the Hovind case. You're mistaken.
So what was he?
You're mistaken and misinformed.
What was he?
He's dead now. I believe I commented something like "good riddance" and the world's better off. I respect that that's a morally thorny way of talking about somebody who I do believe was a pedophile. I don't think there's any doubt in your mind or my mind he was a pedophile. Whether he'd ever offended, I don't know if anybody knows that. I hope that he hadn't. I hope that he just kind of got caught up in this sting and then just went like, and he killed himself, and that nobody had been in his destructive path before he did that. But anyway, he was what was his title? Assistant U.S. Attorney. So right. So his function with the IRS would have been he was an investigator on a number of cases. He would not have led any prosecutions, or he may have led prosecutions. But anyway, he had no involvement in the prosecution at Kent Hovind. He had a very brief involvement in the investigation. But then, I mean, this was a big investigation, right? The IRS. I mean, this is something we're going to agree on. The IRS they turned all the deck cannons on Kent Hovind. They had a lot of investigators, and one of these investigators, who you know the name. So, sorry, name a second investigator. How many there were more than a dozen investigators on this thing. So Atchison's one, John Roy Atchison.
Yeah. What
Number
was his
2,
role?
who else? Who else? Give me a second name.
I'm not concerned with the second name.
I know, but you must know them. You must know them. You've investigated this enough to know this guy's first name, middle name, and last name. You also know about his getting caught up in the sting operation. That's why you bring him up, right? Because he was caught out in a sting operation in some other state, Michigan or whatever it was. So you know his first name, his middle name, his last name. What other names do you know from those prosecutors and investigators?
What's the relevance of that? We're talking about him.
Or whatever. But the relevance of it is your truth-seeking mechanisms, your efforts towards coming to divine what's real and what isn't. So if there are a dozen investigators on this case, and 2 of them proceed onto the prosecution team later on, and are actually involved in the prosecution, right? If this is what really happens, but then someday you see on freehoven.com or you see on some website that like, oh, well, there was this guy, John Roy Atchison, that, you know, et cetera, and they tell the story about him getting caught in this sting. Apparently, like, he was caught soliciting sex with a 5-year-old, which I don't even know how that works. I don't mean the sex, I mean even the soliciting. Like, is he on Skype or something with a 5-year-old? Like, none of this makes any sense to me. But anyway, we all know that story. So you heard that story, and then you went, I wonder if this is true. I wonder if this, pedophile, and let's just call him that, let's not even say alleged pedophile. I wonder if that had some weight on the prosecution at Kent Hovind. Well, I'm going to look into the prosecution at Kent Hovind. Is that what you did? Did you look into the prosecution at Kent Hovind and learn and see, okay, who was on the prosecution team? And then find out, oh no, he wasn't even on the prosecution team. Or did you, as others do who are Hovind supporters, say, oh, okay, well, somebody said he was the lead prosecutor, so therefore, yeah, the lead prosecutor was a pedophile.
So was he or was he not a part of the prosecution team of Kent Hovind? He
was not part of the prosecution team of Kent Hovind, right?
Then who was?
I don't know. I can look it up in the. Okay. Yeah, right. I mean, I have the. Who was appearing.
As it stands, though, already, this Atchison guy, who was clearly involved in one way or another with the Kent Hovind case, proven to be a pedophile. There's rumors around the judge and her connections to other people who were pedophiles. Rumors, okay, rumors. And there's all of this scandal, that's surrounding it, mixed with. Mix that with the fact that she gave this man 10 years. I mean, don't you see how it looks from our side, or are you only just seeing it from your narrow viewpoint?
No, I'm looking at it from here. I'll give you an example of how I'm looking at it. This will be, if I do it right, a really super quick screen share. Just Michelle Hedmeyer. Okay, I should be properly screen sharing. Oops. Not that one. Get out of here. I need like 3 monitors here. Okay, so I am properly screen sharing this PDF file. So this is just one example. This is the transcript of the sentencing proceedings before M. Casey Rogers. That was the district judge, again, who has the lowest rating of any judge in the States. Michelle Hedmeyer. The part of what tipped me off when I heard this thing about how the prosecutor in Hovind's case was this man who, was caught up in the sting operation and killed himself in prison. I went, well, what man are they talking about? Because I know that the prosecutor was a woman, right? And look at this. Like, this is not some crap. Like, I'm going to zoom in. This is not some piece of crap that somebody scanned in. This is PDFs from the United States District Court for the Northern District of Florida, Pensacola Division, right? There's case number, Kent and Joe Hovind, appearances for the plaintiff, Michelle Hedmeyer, Robert Davies. This is the perspective I'm looking at it. I don't sit down, as you guys frequently mischaracterize. I don't